All right, folks, welcome back to the Property Couch podcast, and we've got an amazing episode for you on what is the last summer series episode for this season. We are talking to an incredible human. Her name is Kirsty, and she went from 15 as a market stall owner to the Telstra Young Business Person of the Year. She's got an incredible story. Ben, what do we cover?
From little things, big things grow. From little things, big things grow. So it's a story about momentum and building and getting rich slowly.
Ooh, you weren't expecting that song, were you, folks? Let's rip into the show.
No, you weren't, were you?
Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading experts. Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle Channel, co-host of Escape from the City on the ABC, and partner of Empower Wealth Advisory. Ben Kingsley, chair of Property Investors Council of Australia and the founder of Empower Wealth Advisory, named the 2018 and 2019 Property Advisory Firm of the Year. Stay tuned as they bring you the insider's guide to property, finance and money management.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Property Couch podcast and what is, in fact, the last episode of this year's summer series. I know, very sad. But as we bid farewell to summer series, I say hello to you, Ben. How are you, mate?
Well, mate, I'm obviously a little bit sad because we get inspired by all of these amazing people that come on the summer series. And so it does feel like, end of summer, and we don't get to
one more month to go, but two-thirds of it down.
Yeah, I know.
And when you live in Victoria, you got to milk a summer for all you can. It's not like these Queenslanders who are just in an endless summer.
Yeah, true.
But for us Victorians, so there we go. But folks, never fear, we have an incredible guest today. Her name is Kirsty, and Ben, she was the 2003 Telstra Businesswoman of the Year. So not only that, she's built her portfolio, she's landed the plane, she's highly engaging, she's highly articulate, she's highly intelligent. I can promise you. Strap on in, because this conversation goes to a lot of really cool places, and you as the listener will be the beneficiary of it, Ben. So let's waste no further time. Let's cut to the interview you and I recently had with Kirsty Dunphy. All right, Ben, we've got a very special guest today on the Property Couch. In this episode of the Summer Series, we are chatting with Kirsty Dunphy. We are in for a treat today. Welcome to the Property Couch, Kirsty.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure. We're looking forward to chatting about your story. We've split the Summer Series up to people that have landed the plane and people that have gone through a little bit of pain that they can teach our audience, but you're definitely in the landing the plane segment today. So we're really...
Oh, I don't know. I got a bit of turbulence we could talk about as well.
Okay, well, it sounds like we're going to straddle both lanes, which is really good. But hey, we really love the idea of our audience getting to know you. So if we could go back into your timeline and find out how you had your money blueprint impressioned on your mind. Were there conversations that you had with your family about money?
I was very fortunate, and I always like to look at my background as being really fortunate because I grew up in a very entrepreneurial family. Mum and dad both had very traditional jobs. Mum was a bookkeeper, dad was in the Navy, but then they set out on a very entrepreneurial journey and had all sorts of businesses: laundromats, service station, shortbread making business. They did all sorts of things, and they had a bit of a dabble with investment properties as well. And I was an only child till I was 10, and my parents involved me in all sorts of discussions. And that was just a brilliant way for me to have an understanding of, I guess, their journey towards trying to create financial stability for themselves. Where some people are a bit curious when I say I'm really fortunate is that my parents actually both went bankrupt. And so that happened when I was in my mid-teens. Our whole life sort of fell apart at that stage. They went through that tumultuous period where interest rates were sky high on their investment properties. They made some bad decisions with who they were in business with, and also just had some unsustainable habits. But I got to see all of that firsthand as well. So that's why I consider myself really fortunate. I got to see what worked for them, what actually led them to a relatively early retirement. That's how we ended up in Tassie, but then also what didn't work for them. And so, yeah, the good and the bad there. So that was definitely my formative years. It led me to taking that experience and then starting up my first business when I was 15 years old, which then led to a couple of different business ventures in my teen years, led to me working in a real estate agency as well. And that's where I just fell madly in love with property and property investors as well. Like I started as the filing slave. So I was, the person who got to hand file all of the documents into the property file. So I got to know the names of our investors, and I'd see, okay, this investor has 7 properties. Wow, they must be amazing. They must be so impressive. And then they'd come into the office and they'd be a tradie with paint splattered on their boots. And I'd be like, oh, that wasn't what I was expecting. Or I'd meet an investor that I knew had 3 properties, and it'd just be just a normal mum or a dad. And so I loved that surprise that came from seeing that these ordinary people were out there on this property investment journey. And that's when I went down the rabbit hole and started on my own journey.
Well, you've given us quite a broad spectrum.
How long have we got?
How
long have we got?
Definitely going to double click on. But hey, if we could go back to a couple of things you said at the beginning. Both parents went bankrupt, so you saw the entrepreneurial side, and you said laundromat, service station. I missed the third one, and then they dabbled in investment properties, and then you saw the bankruptcy. What were the observations? What were the lessons? What did you learn from seeing both sides of that coin?
I learned that there is danger, I guess. And so that's probably shaped my risk profile. It's funny, I spoke to someone else recently who'd also had a parent who went bankrupt, and I said, doesn't it make you a little bit more conservative than other people? And he had a completely different outlook. He said, no, it shows me you can come back from anything. So we've both been shaped by that journey in really different ways. But for me, it made me significantly more conservative. I like to have a backup plan for my backup plan. I like to be safe and relatively on the sort of straighty 180 route. And so when I did go out into business for myself, I always have had a backup plan. I've never taken huge risks. I could have had substantially more properties or more business ventures, but I always wanted to make sure that there was a level of safety and security around me. So that's what really, I guess, going through that as a child did for me. It shaped my risk profile pretty substantially.
Now, Kirsty, you and I know each other from times and the industry and so forth. So, and I know you don't like being called Kirsty, so I'm going to call you KD, which is what you like to be called. So, KD, with the story with your parents, that's a really interesting one, right? Because did they disclose to you why it happened? Like, was it unfortunate circumstances, or did they just get too much in front of their skis? Because there's always a great saying, right? You don't go broke making a profit, but you can go broke when you get too aggressive or greedy, right? In terms of that. So tell us what was the tipping point there? Did they carry too much debt? Did they try and build too much wealth too quickly, or were they a victim of circumstance?
There's so many different pieces that led to it. And obviously I have the understanding of a teenager who went through that. So some of it's definitely more simplified than what they would have been going through at the time. But it was the combination of really high interest rates. It was the combination of us being geographically far away from some of the businesses and leaving the wrong people in charge of them. And also, there was just some unsustainable habits as far as attitudes towards money as well, that it was a trifecta. And it didn't happen quickly. It happened over time. It was slow and it was painful. And I think probably just that understanding that I had of, life is about to change. So they actually separated and divorced at the same time that all of this was happening as well. And so, not only did we lose our house, we lost our car, my parents were separating, which probably wasn't actually the worst thing for them, as it isn't sometimes for people. But there was just so much that happened for them in that couple of years. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that tells a story around obviously money psychology and money behaviors. Were they both aggressive, on the same page, because at the end of the day, you go broke through debt. Like ultimately, where you can't, you go bankrupt through not being able to meet your obligations, and usually they're your debt obligations. So yes, interest rates did go higher, but to your point, that's what you've got to be aware of. That's what you've got to be conscious of as part of that. So were they both, working off each other in terms of how they were, or was one sort of more aggressive than the other, and the other one sort of got dragged along on the journey?
Yeah, I think my dad was definitely more interested in the entrepreneurial journey than my mum, but they both had this real love of property. Again, this is my childlike memory of it, but I'd remember us going to auctions on the weekend, and then we'd have a property, and then we'd have to figure out how on earth we were going to purchase that. And sometimes it would be a property that we'd move into, sometimes it would be a property that was an investment, but there was always this sort of whirlwind of excitement. I think even when we moved down to Tassie, it all just sort of happened really quickly and without a lot of forethought into it. Yeah. So there was always that love of property, but not necessarily that commitment to having a foundational understanding of how it all fits together, how it's sustainable in the long term.
Yeah. Okay. So now let's close that chapter out by just when you then find yourself in a rental property with no money, potentially living with one of your parents, what changed for you around your day to day, and from going from not having to sort of think about money or worry about it, what was the household like in terms of the demeanor, the energy, all of those things that sort of are probably part of your lasting memory of why you're probably a little bit more cautious than most?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that strikes me about that time that I'm very grateful for is that I was actually able to stay in school. So I won a scholarship to go to my high school. There's a couple of private schools in the town where I live, and I won a scholarship to go there. And I know that even after a year or two, that 50% scholarship was really, really challenging. So the school actually really looked after me, gave me a bursary, covered the rest of my fees, but there still would have been significant expenses. So I know that it was a real struggle for my mum to actually keep me there. So I'm very, very grateful to her for that. But there were definitely some dark times. I mean, we were never a wealthy family. We were a middle class family who, lived relatively sort of comfortably, but never big mansions or anything like that. But yeah, things definitely got grim. I mean, I lived in one of the lowest socioeconomic areas of the area that I still live in now, and I was going to this fancy, private school. So there was this contrast always in life. And yeah, to go from having always owned our own homes as long as I could remember to then mum being back in that rental market, there was a challenge for sure.
Kirsty, did that sort of contrast between home and school, did that spark, you started your first business at 15. Where did that come from, and what was that business?
I was over in Melbourne staying at my grandmother's house, and I walked into a jewellery shop, and it was sterling silver jewellery. I loved it all. I'd been saving up at my 2 part-time jobs, one in real estate, one at an ice cream shop, and I'd saved up about $1,000, and I was saving up for a car. And instead of investing that money in a car, I actually ended up walking out of that jewellery shop after a couple of times of going in, going out. I walked out with a wholesale order of jewellery, which would fit in the palm of your hand, how much jewelry that is. And then I took it home and had a complete breakdown in terms of, oh my gosh, I'm just like my parents. I've just wasted all of this money. What have I done? I had this full breakdown. And my mum actually sat me down and she said to me, who else has seen business and entrepreneurship at your age and had the experience of both sides? Who's seen what worked and what hasn't? You've been given such a gift here. So I'm very grateful to her for that pep talk she gave me. And then I came home, I set up a market stall. I think I sold about $300 worth of jewelry that first day. At my margins, I made about $150 profit, and then I just kept going from there. So yeah, it was an interesting journey, and I just sort of happened across it. Like lots of businesses, I walked in, I saw a bit of an opportunity. There was nothing like that. And then I I sort of went for it. And eventually I ended up selling at multiple markets, doing some wholesaling to shops, buying jewelry in from Thailand, doing my own wholesale orders. So that was kind of the end of my high school career. Lunch break would go and I'd be pulling out boards of sterling silver studs to sell at lunchtime so I could make an extra 50 bucks from the other kids who all had money at the school that I went to. You know, not only did they have money and some of them very shiny brand new cars, they had, most of them, a very different sort of home life to what I was going through. So I was a weird kid, always hustling, always selling stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So what did that look like then? So you've done that through high school, you've left high school. Where did your path go from there?
Well, I was a nerd, very proudly so. So I did very well in my grades in high school. I've always loved to learn, loved to study. And so I just assumed I would go to university and excel at whatever I did. Except I was 17 when I finished grade 12. And like so many 17-year-olds, I had no idea what I wanted to be when I grew up. So I just picked my two best subjects. I just picked accounting and computer science and went off to do a double degree in those, and found out that I really hadn't picked degrees that were aligned with what I wanted to do as a career. I'd spent all this time trying to get great grades in high school, but never actually trying to figure out what I might want to be when I grew up. It was like I'd missed a massive puzzle piece. And so I unceremoniously dropped out of uni after my first year, after just really not enjoying it at all. I didn't tell my mum for about 6 months because at that stage I was the first person on her side of the family ever to go to uni, and on my dad's side I was the second after him. He went as a mature age student, so there was not a lot of university degree holders in my family. And then I just promptly dropped out after year one, and I just kind of hated it so much. I think not because of the university experience, but just because I hadn't taken the time to have a gap year, which I didn't even know was a thing at that stage. I will absolutely be encouraging my kids when they get to that age to have a gap year. If I'd had a gap year, I may never have come back though, because I love travel so much. But I started working at a real estate agency in Mount Eliza, and at nights I was working in a restaurant, a pizza and a pasta restaurant, which probably was the absolute best job of my entire life as far as preparing me for other jobs, because it taught me how to talk to people. And I was such a shy kid, like first day of uni, having to go around in a circle and just say our name and where we were from. And I'm like getting lightheaded and nearly passing out because of the stress. And now I can talk to you guys. I've been on stage talking to thousands of people. And I think that's all because of that waitressing job. So I actually loved being out in the working world. I loved working in a real estate agency. I loved working in the restaurant, and I actually didn't end up finishing a uni degree for 12 years after I started. I eventually got an MBA, so I did it, and I think basically just to tick that box because it felt like something I should do. But yeah, then I was off in the wide world of working, which I love and I always have loved.
So let's go through that. So ultimately, you got the jewelry business, the sterling silver, and then you're into university. You're doing these part-time jobs. You're working in real estate. You're getting a passion for that. You're also discovering the beauty and tranquility of travel in terms of filling your bucket from an emotional and experiential point of view. So take us into when you started your first full-time job. And then basically what did that lead to?
So my first full-time job came when the real estate agency I was working for in Victoria went through a bit of internal combustion. There was a strong salesperson, a strong business owner. They decided to go in their separate ways, and I was kind of left in the middle without a real position. The restaurant that I was working for was having some issues as well, and I was like, maybe it's time to go home. So I ended up back home in Tassie, 19. I'd finally told my mum I'd dropped out of uni, which was a great conversation from memory. And I'm living in my mum's rental property after having a couple of years out in the wild world, and she's asking questions like, what time will you be home tonight? I'm feeling horribly affronted by that question because after all, I'm a complete adult. And I just got a job working for the real estate agency that I'd started working for at age 15. I've always needed to provide for myself, didn't want to be a burden on my mum while she was in that process of rebuilding. So I went and got a job working for a real estate agency, said to the boss about 3 months in, here I am 19, I'm literally doing the filing and handwriting the condition reports for the property managers whose handwriting wasn't neat enough. So I had some pretty big responsibilities, but I went to the boss of the agency and told him I was his succession plan and that I wanted to work on a path towards one day owning the real estate agency. And he, having known me since I was very young, had a bit of a chuckle, didn't take me too seriously. A few months later, I said to him, I want to start getting my manager's license so that I can take over from you one day. And he said, that's all well and good, but you'll need to fund that yourself. And so I started traveling down to Hobart to do the course to get my real estate manager's license. Again, all the while probably thinking I was eventually going to convince my boss that I was ready to take over his agency. I started doing other things within the real estate agency, more high-level tasks, but just nothing substantial. So I wasn't selling, I wasn't a property manager, but I did all of the in-office tasks. And I got my real estate manager's license, and the universe just aligned, and the top salesperson in the business that I was working in and the top previous salesperson from that business decided that they wanted to start their own agency. They didn't have a manager's license, so I was the little key that made that whole puzzle work. And so that led to me being a third owner in a real estate agency at 21.
How did the old boss go with that announcement? Was he thrilled, or
He passed away in the last couple of years, and I am very grateful to him for his mentorship during that time. I went and told him, we all did, because we'd all worked for him at one stage, and he was supportive. I don't think he expected us to be quite as successful as we did, but we started up in 2001, and the real estate market in Tasmania went off its chops in 2003. Like, we were so lucky. It was such fortuitous timing. I remember being there. I remember putting a property online one night, and it was for some ridiculously high price, like $67,000 for a 3-bedroom brick house in Tassie. And I remember coming in the next day to 10 offers sight unseen or something ridiculous like that. And I was like, oh, what's going on here? Because I'd never seen a market boom. The real estate market in Tassie for the entire time I'd known it had been very, very flat. And that's what Tassie tends to do. We're flat and then we get a bit exciting for a while. And we were very fortunate to have started up a brand new boutique real estate agency right before a market boom. So very great timing. But also, the lesson that I took away from that, and I always take away from that, is that there's no learning that's ever wasted. Like, I got my manager's license not exactly knowing why, and no one really understood why I wanted to get it. But when they needed it, I was there. You know, if I didn't have that manager's license, I maybe would have gone to work for them as the receptionist. But instead, I went in as a director, a 1/3 business owner, and went on a great ride and an adventure there.
Tell us about that ride and adventure. What did it look like? You went through a boom, clearly. You were learning the ropes as a business owner, obviously navigating, the complexities of partnerships. Tell us about that.
And partnerships are hard. That was 3 people as well. I've had quite a few business partnerships that have been 3 people, and it's always really, really hard for one person in the 3. It's always really challenging. I was working with 2 brothers as well, both substantially my seniors, both who knew a lot about the real estate industry. What worked really well was that they recognized what they didn't know. So they didn't know about the tech side of it. They didn't know about the admin side of it, the trust accounting, all of that sort of stuff. So I had a lot of leeway to deal with that. Got my first taste of staff management, and I've got to tell you, I was rubbish, like absolute rubbish. We ended up oddly selling a hotel, taking over management of the hotel. I ended up moving in and running the hotel, and within approximately 2 weeks, I had a mass exodus of all of the staff that worked in the hotel because I micromanaged them to death, basically. So that was a fun lesson into my management skills, or the lack thereof. But every business owner goes through that. You figure out what you're great at. I figured out then and there that I was terrible to begin with at staff management, and micromanagement is something that I have to always fight against because I love to know the minutiae of things. I love to know how everything works. But yeah, I went from being a 21-year-old starting that business with 2 older gentlemen, and then I think I had my first 70-year-old staff member within the first couple of years. My mum actually came to work for us. That was probably, and I think she would admit this as well, probably our most challenging staff relationship, because my mum is a very, very strong person, very smart, but very, very stubborn. And one of the things that I did during that time was I looked really young for my age. I like to say I looked like a walking fetus at 21 when I started, because I looked really, really young. And so I just thought, how can I get credibility where I don't really have it? And so I went out and I entered all sorts of awards and competitions. And during that time, I'm not 100% sure how. We had a pretty good business, but I ended up being announced as the Young Australian of the Year the Young Telstra Businesswoman of the Year. Young Telstra Businesswoman of the Year. And to date, they've closed the awards down now. I was the youngest person ever awarded, and I think I was 22 when I got that. And that just led to all sorts of publicity, lots of credibility that came with that. A real sort of counter to the fact that I looked so young and actually had so little experience. And that led to public speaking jobs. And then actually ended up doing a public speaking job for at least 300 or 400 real estate agents over in New Zealand for the Harcourts group. And little did I know, when I got off the stage and went home, Mike Green, who was the head of the group, got on stage and said to all of the real estate agents, "What do we think of Kirsty?" And they were like, "Yeah, it was a very rah-rah conference." And he said, "We think she should join our group. If you'd like her to be part of the Harcourts group, here's her email address." He put it up on the screen, and I came home, landed off the plane, and had hundreds of emails telling me how great that real estate group was, how wonderful it was. And so we pivoted from being a boutique real estate agency to being the franchisors for Harcourts in Tasmania.
Clever manager.
It was such a clever move. I really didn't have any opportunity to say no to that. Then we grew to a couple of other satellite offices under that group. And then I was about 6 years into that journey, and it was really interesting being part of a bigger group. I did find the bureaucracy challenging, which I think when you come from a teeny tiny business and you want to change the colors, the font, the website, anything, you can just do it instantly. To work within a franchise brand is hard. And so I made the decision after 6 years to exit that business. And I sold to one of my co-founders and a couple of our team members. But then I'm a sucker for punishment. So I did it all over again with another real estate agency straight after that. So I did another 6 years with a property management only real estate agency, sort of pivoting into that property investor space that I love so much.
So were you executive level only, or were you listing as well?
Yeah, I probably listed maybe I would say less than 10 properties in my entire time working across real estate. So I was not a prolific sales agent by any stretch of the imagination. And I made some silly mistakes during that time. So no, I was mostly operational when I was in the real estate agencies. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Let's sort of pick up that thread around property management, KD, and let's talk about what were some of your biggest lessons in terms of managing the relationships with the owners, the landlords, and the tenants. How did you get that marriage working well? Because at the end of the day, the tenant wants safe and quiet enjoyment, but at the cheapest possible price they can get it at, and obviously the landlord wants the tenant to have safe and quiet enjoyment, but also wants to get a return on investment. How did you approach, sort of managing that relationship?
I would like to say that I think that property managers are the biggest unsung heroes in the real estate industry. There is probably no tougher job in the whole industry, and they are notoriously strung out and overworked, and it's really, really challenging as a business owner because the margins in property management are actually really tight. So you can't afford to pay property managers the big bucks that their sales counterparts earn because there aren't the margins there. That said, our property management only agency, we went back to being boutique, which was what I knew and loved, and we called it Elephant Property because our whole philosophy was really, if an elephant doesn't forget, that's kind of what you want from your property manager. You don't want someone to forget the promises that they've made. If they say they're going to do something, they need to do it. So it was all around that communication piece, which is not rocket science, but that's the number one biggest thing that frustrates tenants and owners alike. Oh, you said you were going to do this and then nothing happened. So again, it was just making sure that the lines of communication were open, that the tenants understood that we work for the owners, not for them, but that we're trying to mediate a really win-win outcome for everyone. And that's how I've treated my own property portfolio as well. You know, going to the property managers and saying, okay, well, you've told me that there's a bit of maintenance here, but what do the tenants actually need so that they stay, so that they're comfortable? Is there anything else that I need to be aware of? You know, if the tenants are constantly saying the place is cold, but it doesn't come to me because it's not a maintenance issue, that's not the kind of relationship I want with my property managers.
Yep. So you talked about your property portfolio there. So let's chat about that. You've been investing for a long time. Love to hear about your first investment property and the mindset that it took you, because I believe your first investment property was around about or just before the time that you got into this partnership at 21. So tell us about that, the spark, and why you went on to build a significant portfolio.
Yeah, and I think probably the first thing to note is that I had absolutely no idea about borrowing capacity at that stage. I just knew the bank said I could buy something up to 90,000. But again, that risk parameter that I have that says if I can do 90,000, how much less can I do than that? So my first property, I still own it today. My brother actually lives in it. It's about 500 meters that way from where I'm sitting right now. And it's a little 1-bedroom unit. I got it for $31,500. I got the $7,000 first home owners grant. I lived in it. I loved it. And it felt really doable and really, really manageable for me. And that was how I treated my entire portfolio as I grew. I remember I used to the house I'm sitting in at the moment, it's been substantially renovated, but I bought it not long after that one and it was $90,000. And I was like, whoa. That is a bit much. But yeah, and then there was a long period of time. And again, I'm saying this knowing that a lot of your listeners are going to be like, what a cow, you know, with their properties under 100,000. But that's the benefit of the wrinkles that come with this. It's time in the market there. But I remember for ages I wouldn't buy anything that cost more than 100,000. It was just boring property after boring property. I went through a real spate of like, find me the boringest red brick properties near decent schools under 100,000, and I'll take as many as I can get. But then one came up and it was 255,000, and I was like, ooh, but it had a guaranteed tenant, and I still have that in my portfolio as well. So I think if we dug down into my portfolio, we would see that the underlying strategy is how to be boring. I buy boring properties that nice families hopefully want to stay in for a really long time, and I try to look after them well.
Yeah. So that's a good strategy, and you get to look in the rear vision mirror after 20, 25 years and see that worked. But what was driving that at the time? What was causing you to stay in Tassie? What did you get enticed to go across the sea to Melbourne, Victoria? Like what? How did when you set up this interview with us? You said I'm proudly boring, right? So it's a very strong value and guiding light for you. Tell us a bit more about how that came about.
Yeah, so I've had properties in Victoria. I've got one at the moment there, but I've had another 4 over there. The part that comes from being boring is I know this market, like the back of my hand. I know if something's going to rent because I've worked in and around this industry for so long. So that concept of being a bit more risk averse has played really heavily into it, but also it's just opportunistic. I worked in the real estate industry for 20 years. When something good would come up with me or a friend who was an agent, I'd be like, oh, I'll just grab that one as well. So I didn't have that kind of exposure to other markets. Obviously, it makes me significantly less diversified than other people. I would like to say I went a little non-boring one time. I'd read a bit too much Kiyosaki and I was looking for, an 8plex or something like that, which doesn't really exist that much here in Tassie, but I got 4 units on one title down in Hobart. They're still in the portfolio as well. Like, that's the thing about my portfolio. It is relatively unchanged from my late 20s, and I'm 46 now. So it's sat there and been boring and gone from being a little bit positively geared to quite positively geared over the years. So
that's the beauty of time kicking in. But KD,
yes.
you're another one of the real estate agent sort of clan who loves to trade some property. So how many have you sold? Because obviously the portfolio is in the, in excess of $10 million, which is congratulations to you. But you said you've sold a few in Victoria. How many have you traded versus how many have you kept? And have you ever thought about, what if I didn't sell them? What would have been the different story?
Yeah, so 2 that I sold in Melbourne, I had bought off the plan, and the construction was subpar. I kept having some issues with them. I kept fixing the issues substantially, and tens of thousands of dollars to rectify some issues, and I just felt like they were just bad juju. Great depreciation, but not really in fitting with my overall portfolio. So that's why I sold those 2. That was maybe in the last
just
5
on those,
years.
can we double click on those?
Yeah.
Because what caught your attention about them? Was it were you sold into them? Was it, or like it's another example of off the plan or house and land packages that don't perform well? Your earlier strategy of buying existing property, brick and tile that are older, that are reliable and durable, like in terms of that, has served you incredibly well because you've worked out that the land to asset ratio is the big important thing there. But then you've gone off and been seduced by, maybe, is it shiny and new, or the depreciation?
Yeah, definitely shiny and new, and me wanting to, do bigger and better. And every time I've tried to do things that are outside of my general blueprint, it hasn't gone particularly well. The other 2 that I sold in Melbourne, I sold them after I sold my first real estate agency because I didn't know what was next. And again, that concern I have about not being financially stable for those around me, I just went, if I sell just those 2 in Melbourne, I can offset the entire portfolio. And so I don't miss any of the properties I have. I have one weird property that I bought from a girlfriend and then sold back to her 3 years later. So that one left the portfolio because I felt like it was the right thing to do to sell it back to her. But for the most part, it's just been a couple of units, a couple of things that didn't really fit with my overall strategy. And right now I'm thinking about whether or not I sell one more. And it's just because it was my home that I lived in for 20 years before this home. I would never buy it as an investment property. And I've kind of held on to it because my daughter's attached to the property, but I think I'll probably move that one on as well within the the 6-year time frame, so that I can do that without any capital gains, because I don't think I'm going back to it. And again, it's that whole concept of, I would never have bought it as an investment property, so why am I keeping it as one?
And our community would probably be thinking, any commercial in your portfolio or just resi?
I'm so boring. I have one commercial property. I've had another one previously, but both have been the building that I've operated my business from. And so I sold my mortgage broking business to my best mate in May, and she still operates that business from there. So there are, effectively, when we bought it, there was 2 commercial tenancies, a bunch of car parks, a billboard on the side, and 2 residential tenancies. Her business is so big right now, she's taken over everything except for the back residential tenancy. So there's a little furnished unit at the back, and then it's all commercial. And I don't know why I'm so afraid of commercial. I think it's the long vacancy times and just the fact that it's not what I know. But I have loved owning that property, and it came to me in such a Tasmanian way. I was sitting in the playground one afternoon picking my kids up from school, and I said to another mum, I was like, I'm having such a hard time finding somewhere to move our mortgage broking business to, because at that stage 3 of us worked in an office approximately the size of my desk right now. And when clients would come, the others would have to leave so that I could see them, basically. Or if any of us wanted to move in our seats, everyone would have to shuffle. And this mum just said, the building opposite me's quietly on the market. I'll get you through this afternoon. And I walked through and went, yes, please, I'll take it on the spot. So yeah, it's been a great property to own. It's a very old property. Estimates have it being originally built in 1880. So it needs a bit of love and care. So we've gutted it, but I love owning that one.
Yeah, for sure.
Hey, Kirsty, what does life look like now? Like this, there's this really cool evolution. Saw mum and dad, 15, started your own real estate agent, sold that, Harcourts, or like it's been a wonderful story that you've outlaid to date. But what does that look like in terms of lifestyle by design? Where did it sort of move into some planning for some lifestyle? Because for our audience, you've spent a lot of time recently traveling. That is a big feature for you, and clearly entrepreneurship is in your spirit and in your blood, but also so too is the freedom to do the things that you love. So what does that look like? How much planning did you put into it, and how close to the plan are you living right now?
Yeah, I've never been the kind of person where if you say, what will you be doing in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, I have a definitive answer. I'm a bit more, I guess, sporadic than that. But I write a sort of a travel and lifestyle inspired blog, and I wrote something the other day, and I wrote this saying in it that was like, if I could go back and tell 16-year-old me the amount of travel that I get to do, that I get to do it with my two favorite people on the planet, who are my two daughters for most of the time, her mind would be blown. Like, I never left the country till I was 21, and I instantly fell madly, madly in love with it. And so from that perspective, my lifestyle by design has just been about figuring out what's actually important to me. So I drive a Hyundai. It's blue. It has heated seats, but that's about as fancy as I get in the car department. I have far too many books, but no designer handbags. I don't have expensive tastes, but I really, really, really love to travel. Like, I figured out that that's what gives me immense joy and makes me super happy. So everything lifestyle wise is all around how can I be a good mum? How can I see the world? How can I have an impact on the world that we live in? So hopefully, I'm still in a sort of an in-between phase after selling my business. I'm trying to figure out exactly what that looks like. I've got a couple of not-for-profit board positions, but as far as an actual job that I go to day to day, it's very weird not to have staff and a team and people. So I haven't quite figured it all out yet, but I do this every so often. 6 years in the first real estate agency, and then I kind of went and blew it all up, and then 6 years in the next real estate agency, and then we sold that one as well. And so 10 years in mortgage broking. It's been a wild ride. It's been absolutely the best career experience of my life, and who knows what's next.
So,
I'm waiting to find out.
okay, Dee, when you're sitting around the table with your daughters and you're having conversations around life and money and finance, obviously they've got a mum who's a builder. I mean, that's, ultimately that's the word around the world at the moment. You're a builder. Like, if you build things and you build economic value, that's what you've been able to do. What are the conversations that you're having with your daughters around their life and what they want to be, and how are you communicating that to them about the journey that they're going to go on?
That's my main job at the moment, isn't it? To raise little kids who, although they're growing up in financially different circumstances to me, I don't want to raise little princesses. So I think my job is to keep them really well informed, but also to make their life kind of hard as well. To that end, they've started multiple businesses over the years. It's not like they get up and go, I want to start a business today. Their mum's like, cool, what kind of business are you going to start up today? So they sell tea at the moment. That's their main thing. And I make them do like these sales pitches, because I feel like that's one of the life skills I can pass on to them. Like, I think back to COVID, and both of them loved being from home. I was in Tassie, so significantly more fortunate than, say, people in Melbourne. But during our homeschooling period, my kids loved it so much. And I said, oh my God, you can't stay homeschooled. That's what they want. And I was like, absolutely not. You'd get significantly stupider being homeschooled from here. And they're like, no, Mum, we've learned so much about superannuation, about interest rates, and so we have all of those sorts of conversations. I would say that I probably don't have the same level of adult conversations that my parents had with me growing up. I think that there was beauty and a level of being a bit cursed by that. So I keep it more simplistic, but I talk to them about, giving back. They've got their own money, they get their own pocket money, they have their own spending money. I'm trying to raise the most responsible little kids that I can do.
Some nice core values in there by the sounds of it as well, which is beautiful.
So what would you? So we've got an audience of people that are trying to create a passive income. We are very get rich slow, conservative, trying to build not too many, all those sorts of things. So what's the plan for your portfolio? You know, you've talked about how you don't want to raise princesses, but you've got a significant portfolio, and if your plan is to keep that, you're 46, so that's got a ton of doubling cycles still to come. What is the plan for handing it over? What do you think that looks like? How is it going to support your travel? What does the passive income look like in terms of supporting your lifestyle? So what are some of the inspiring things that you could probably share with our audience so they can stay fixed on the North Star of this is actually the path, and you know, some issues we have with tenants and some negative friends and some interest rates, all that sort of stuff. You're the person that they can look to for inspiration around that.
And I love that you guys are get rich slow as well. Like the number one thing that I would say to people all of the time in my mortgage broking sort of career, going on that journey with people, was if it seems like it's too good to be true, it probably is. So not falling for those get rich quick sort of scenarios that are popping up on everyone's TikTok and Instagram and all of that sort of stuff, I think is so important, and that harks back to my childhood as well. So just making sure that you are being really sustainable in the decisions that you make. And so as far as, I guess, you know, keeping on with that journey, it's just about making sure that I make smart decisions now. So I'm not out actively trying to buy 100 properties a year or anything like that. I'm about making sure that the debt that I have is properly structured, properly offset, set up so that it can be sustainable. I've got older properties in my portfolio, so making sure that I'm on top of maintenance and all of that sort of stuff. And some of the properties I bought when I was younger have significantly more maintenance because I didn't focus on lower maintenance properties until later. So I've got some that really do need a fair bit of love and care and attention. As far as what I want to leave for my kids, maybe I shouldn't tell you because I've told them a different story to what's true, actually. Maybe I'll just let them listen to the first half an hour of this. But my kids actually believe that when I leave this earth, which I hope is significantly far down the path, they expect to receive nothing from me. So one of my least favorite things that I ever had happen was when I would have clients in front of me as a mortgage broker, sitting talking with them about their plan for the future, and their plan was that Granny's going to drop off the perch soon, and that's how they were going to get their deposit, because it made me feel sick to my stomach. So my kids expect nothing when I go. Obviously, I hope that I will leave some sort of a legacy, but there's a massive testamentary trust. And my poor executors, if I do go early, because my kids get no lump sums or anything till after they're 35, I want them to have the same opportunity I had to make something of myself. And I know that my journey would have been substantially different if I'd been handed a windfall at 18 or 21 or something like that. So I don't want to steal that opportunity from them. I've already stolen the opportunity for them to have that moment of awe that I had when I first went overseas when I was 21 and my entire mind was blown. My kids will never get that because that's just been part of their life growing up. But I don't want to take the possibility of them forging their own way in the world and figuring out their own journeys. So yeah, let's just make sure my kids don't hear that part.
Well, it's incredible. Because I thought about that a lot too. And originally, you think, oh yeah, you built this up and you hand it all over to your kids, but you're like, no, you wouldn't give them the keys to a Ferrari when they're 17. So yeah, part of that is helping them get into their first property and then let them cut their own teeth from there. So I think
exactly
your message well and truly resonates.
And I just redid my will. Like I would recommend everyone out there who hasn't had a look at it in the last couple of years. And so my kids, like, let's say something were to happen and I were to go far earlier, they get unlimited education, unlimited health, they get a little travel allowance so that they can, still do a little bit of that, and they get help into their first deposit for a house, but it's matched. So my kids already have their own share portfolio. It's their money. They choose where to invest it. My youngest has been delighted to walk past one of the big banks and proudly states that she owns it every time she walks past it. So they've made their own decisions around that, and they're good little savers. One's a better saver than the other. One's a really good spender. So we have a lot of conversations. 12 and 14 now.
Yeah.
Yeah. One
We're
of
in
them
the
is
same
single-handedly
same
keeping
life.
Lego afloat. So, yeah.
Hey, KD, you are success personified in terms of all the things, and I could rattle off, what I observe in terms of probably a dozen traits and behaviors that you bring to the table that ensure you are going to be a successful person. But in your own eyes, how do you define the things, your actions and behaviors that you've done that have given you the opportunity to be ambitious and to be aspirational and to ultimately thrive in the Australian market?
I think my superpower is a bit of a weird one. I think it's that I have unreasonably high levels of confidence even when I shouldn't. So, as an example, I broke my ankle last January and I was super upset because I was meant to go skiing the next week and I was cranky. And in my cranky girl tantrum, I decided to grab the hardest thing from my bucket list, which was to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. And I started rallying my friends. I was like, I'm going to climb Kilimanjaro this year because I was angry at the world that my foot was all smashed up. And so I went and climbed Mount Kilimanjaro in October last year, and people trained for that for a very long time, put in significantly more training than I did. But I made it to the top mostly because I'm stubborn and I have high levels of confidence in my ability to do anything. So yeah, if I could give that superpower onto anyone, I think it would be substantially helpful, because some of the things I've done, I had no right to be there. I had no right at 21 years old to be a third owner in a real estate agency. I didn't have the skills. I didn't have any of that expertise. I learned it on the job and as I went. When I became a mortgage broker 10 years ago, I thought that a long career in real estate would give me all of the skills I needed to be an amazing mortgage broker, and soon found out that that was utter rubbish, and that I was completely unqualified for that job as well. But I'm the kind of person that goes, yeah, I can do that, and that's been the way my whole life. I don't know why I have that, and I don't know why more people don't have it, because there's nothing really that bad that can come from having a go. You either smash it out of the park or you fall on your face, but either way you pick it up and you know at least that you've tried. So it's the same when
Combination of effort and attitude. And in your case, I know how hard you work, but in your case, you don't feel like it's work, it's passion work, right? So it's just easy for the way in the way in which it comes to you, because it's purpose driven and it's purpose led. So whether it's helping someone in terms of managing their property portfolio, or helping them, in your mortgage broking capacity to help them get their first home or their next investment property, you understand that, through that purpose and passion, you've been able to also be ultimately rewarded for the effort and the attitude that you bring to the table. So it's an absolute credit to you in terms of how you've been able to get so much out of, you've only been here for 46 years, but it's an incredible
That's the
journey.
key to business though, isn't it? You just help enough people get what they want and then suddenly you've got a business.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So
and rounds out probably with like my favorite quote that I always try and remember, because I can get sometimes very success focused, but I always try and remember back to something I read many years ago, and it said success is getting what you want, but happiness is wanting what you get. And so just making sure that I keep that front of mind as well, because yeah, I'm pretty goal driven. I love a to-do list and a checklist, and but I've also got to remember, and I do get that happiness, and have done with all of my businesses, in helping people live their best lives.
Hey, Kirsty, as we sort of head for home, what would you say to 19-year-olds now? You've obviously had it even goes back to 15, but a lot of the generation now is saying that it's too difficult. They're squeezed out of the property market. But Ben and I on this platform see a lot of young people who are outliers who go and get it done, right? So you were an outlier back when you were younger, but what is the hope or optimism or projection that you would say to people who are listening to this, who feel a little bit sort of like the system isn't for them? I mean, you would never accept that. So what would you say to those people?
I would never accept it, but I do agree that it's significantly harder. Like if I look at the percentage of my income that first property cost me, the second one, all of that, obviously I had an easier road to building a property portfolio than people do at the moment. So my advice would be to see a great broker and get creative and actually get a plan in place significantly before you need it. Don't go to a broker, a month before you want to buy your first property. Go and see someone who's going to hold your hand right through the journey and say to you, this is how you can do it. Utilize things like the First Home Super Saver scheme, the government schemes that are out there, but know the pros and the cons of all of them. But there's a way. There's absolutely a way for everyone. It just might be a bit of a stickier journey than other people have gone through in previous years. It's so funny when you said, what advice would you give to a 19-year-old? I was like, don't vape and read more books. I'm not sure that's the advice that you were thinking of, but that too.
Yeah, that too. So let's bring it home. I'm going to give the microphone to you now, KD, and you tell us, what it is that you want our community to hear from you that we may not have covered so far in our, because we could have gone off in so many threads. I mean, you've got such wonderful experience and knowledge to share, but is there anything that you, in preparation or thinking about coming on the pod that you wanted to pass on some of that knowledge?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think sometimes people lament the lack of mentors out there. And so maybe you've never had a family member who hasn't invested in property. Maybe you've never had someone within your friendship circle who has, but the very best mentors in the world are available for free. They're doing podcasts, they're writing books. Even if you can't afford to buy their books, you can get it at your local library or on your phone on the Libby app. Like, there are so many mentors out there for people, and there's so much direction. And in the same way that, I was a teenager reading Jan Summers and Kiyosaki and Paul Clitheroe and every other, book out there that I could get my hands on at the time. All those classics are still out there. And I think every property investor should go back and read Jan Summers. And, that was my original Bible. But there are so many people out there who are looking for direction and support, and just to know that it's there for you. And thankfully, because of technology and because people like yourselves put out podcasts like this, it's there and waiting.
Oh, what a treat. It's been fabulous chatting with you, KD. We are of the same vintage, although Ben's got a little bit more on us and you're a bit younger than us.
Yeah.
The same influences. We're all BG. We're all before Google. We're all before YouTube. We're all sort of reading the same books back then. But what a wonderful conversation that we've had with you. And I reckon our audience would benefit from that enormously. But on behalf of everyone here on the podcast, thanks for joining us today.
Appreciate your time. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.
There you go, Ben. KD, as she likes to be called.
KD, yes.
I just love that conversation. It was just, when you get an opportunity to speak with someone who thinks big, who's been around, who's been investing for some time across multiple markets, taken a risk, had the accolades of her peers, tried new things. And if you actually get to know Kirsty, she's got Lifestyle by Design front of mind. She's got a blog that she writes, and she's got, I think it's 50 things she wants to tick off before she's 50.
She's an author. The grass doesn't grow under her feet, that's for sure. No. So, hey, I've got a couple of notes here. This one here about you don't go broke making a profit. And so she's been able to sort of generate and build on that. But I also want to make sure that we counterbalance that with this whole concept that if you get too aggressive, you get in the front of your skis, you can potentially also get a bit too greedy. So this is a message out to the community there, because what we sometimes see is these young upstarts sort of really trying to get lots of properties really quickly and getting into an enormous amount of debt. Well, we don't know what's around the corner. A black swan can wipe a lot of people out like it did in the GFC. Yeah. And so just a little timely reminder that we love people taking action, calculated risks, getting on with things. But we also want to remind people that sometimes you can move into impatient greed state, and that can potentially be your downfall. That's not the case, obviously, with KD, but it's just a little message that I wrote down when we did the interview with Kirsty, and I said, all right, that's true too. Now, the other big thing that I also talk about here, big thing? She's a doer. KD is a doer, and I've been watching her through her mortgage breaking career. I got fortunate enough, as I said earlier on the episode, that I've met Kirsty, many, many times in terms of the journey that we've been on. We've spoken on the phone. She's also sent me a lovely Christmas present one year. We had a Kit Kat Christmas house that you got to make with the kids.
Yeah.
So, no, just a beautiful,
Good
beautiful person. So, very, very well done to you. You're an absolute example of what's possible with a great attitude and a great mindset.
Yeah, and Kirsty, I don't think would mind us letting you know she's a decamillionaire. She has a very conservative nature. Her parents formed part of that conservative nature. And what doesn't get spoken about a lot in our industry, Ben, is the people who are at the front of the bus in social media or wherever they're getting your attention. Yeah. They're selling extraordinary results to people who are not able to replicate those results. And what I mean by that is they're usually running businesses that spit off a lot of profit.
Yes.
And usually at the expense of the people that they're trying to market to.
Yeah.
And that excessive profit allows them to take on excessive risk and build excessively large portfolios, which the general population cannot do. And so what I reckon Kirsty did is remind us that she has a higher profile. She's been in the game for a long time. She's been in business. She's been able to bank some of those profits, but she's also done it in a way that's conservative and really fits the mantra of what we're trying to build an audience and a community and a mindset and a paradigm for everyone on this podcast that is to stick around for the decades, not to try and get rich in a couple of minutes. So I just think it just fits the lane so beautifully. Humble person, wonderful hearted human. I really enjoyed the conversation, but the lessons that you can learn from what you just heard in that interview are profound.
KD's into helping others, Bryce. And so it's not the last time you're going to hear from KD. In fact, there'll be hopefully a few times this year that she'll be joining us.
Ben, that sounds like a little breadcrumb to me.
Yeah,
that sounds like a breadcrumb.
So, yes.
Thank you, KD. Our community will appreciate you. Ben and I definitely appreciate you. Thanks for joining us on the final episode of the summer series, helping us finish with a bang. Yes, Ben. So that's 2 out of 3 months of summer is down. Hey, as we head for home, you got a couple of things?
Yeah, a couple of important ones. Obviously, this is the last shout out for Bryce's sabbatical messages as he takes a break from the show. So big call. I tell you what, some of the stuff we've received is it's just amazing. It's beautiful. So we can't wait to unpack all of that on next week's show. Yeah. So shout out, last chance. Obviously, go into the show description. Yeah, well, she worked hard and she paid others to say as well. Yeah. But basically what we're going to do, just get on the show notes here or show description, find out how you can send a message to us so we can put it into a book or get it on the show. It's going to be a great show next week, probably maybe a little extended show as well because there's so much to get through. So make sure you look at that as well. So, anyone who says, thanks, Bryce, from Ben, that's sort of what you're looking for. We're looking for a little bit more than that in terms of what that story looks like.
Hey, shout out to all of our guests on the summer series, Ben. It's incredible the amount of courage that people have. But, way back on our first summer series episode, we had Alana, then we went to Matt. We've rolled to Kat, then we went to Ben, Daksha, then we went to Steve, then Christian, then Mark, and then here we are today with KD. So thank you to all of you.
Yes.
To say we are appreciative of your courage would be an understatement. And please reach out to the Stig, info at the Property Couch or on socials, whichever you are, and we'll make sure we get some gifts to you.
Yes, you've got some gifts coming your way. Absolutely.
For appearing on the podcast, mate. But there we go. We've wrapped another, I think that's our 7th or 8th, might even be our 9th, definitely 8th, I reckon, series of the summer series, folks. We hope you enjoy that. If you are still in the luxury of sitting in your caravan or away on a holiday or enjoying an extended break, congratulations to you. For those of you that are launching back into the year, we hopefully are starting well. We'll talk about what's coming up in the property market in next month.
Yeah, we've got, obviously, next month we do our property outlook for the year. We'll recap on what also happened last year because it was a very strong year last year off the back of some interest rate cuts. But now we've got inflation where it is and, all of that sort of big story that's coming off the back of that. So, mate, thank you for also pulling together the summer series like you do. The Stigs in the background have also put that together.
I think I'm getting their credit, let's be honest.
The theme has always been, this one was overcoming adversity and also landing the plays, so investing for the decades. So you did a great job of pulling all of those wonderful guests together. So the message is out to you. What are you going to overcome? How are you going to set your goals up for 2026? What surplus are you going to strive to achieve this year? And how are you going to take action to be able to make sure that you become what you plan to become.
There you go. Ben's putting down the challenge for you in 2026, folks. Make this be your year. Okay, you've just heard Summer Series. Summer Series at the end of this year. You can be a part of that. Just put some plans in place, turn up, talk to Ben, and then you'll say, oh, I've been a bit nervous. I didn't know if I should put my hand up. I promise you, every single person that you've just heard for the last 9 weeks was nervous. Ben and I had to make sure that we reassured them before we push record. And then look what happens. They did some amazing conversations.
Great stories.
And some incredible stories. So there you go, mate. Ben, until next week.
Till next week, knowledge is empowering, but only if you act on it as we celebrate this big man here.
See you next week, folks.